The next thing we are going to be doing in this project is adding paging. Paging will allow us to put a smaller number of students or objects on each page and page through them so that we don't end up with long lists that users would need to scroll through. This is how you do that. The first thing that you need to do is install a package into Visual Studio's called pagelist.mbc. To do that, you need to go to NuGet Package Manager console, and either type or copy in the code, install package pagelist.mbc. This will install the package into your project. If this page comes up, you need to hit yes to all. Next, build your project using Control-Shift-B or go to the Build menu. Now we will actually be modifying the code of both studentcontroller.cs and student/index.cs HTML. In controllers.studentcontroller.cs, the first thing we need to do is we need to give it access to the page list code that we just used, that we just brought in. Type using paged list. Visual Studios will probably autocomplete the command for you. Go ahead and save. Next, we are going to add to the index method. But there are many changes, so I'm just going to copy and paste the new method in and explain the changes to you. A few things were done here. The first thing that was done is we added a parameter to define what page we are on. Every time the page is changed or the first time it is opened, the parameters passed in to say we are on the first page of students or we are on the second page. This if statement defines if a new search string was put in. So every time we search, we automatically want to go back to page 1. But if we didn't search, we want to make sure that we either stay on the page we're on or go to the next page or the previous page, depending on how the function was called. The last thing that was changed was how we actually return the view. We define our page size, in this case, is 3. So we have 3 students per page. Page number defines which page we're on. We need to actually make sure that we have a page for each student so that no students are left off. And this is how we calculate it. Then we finally return the view of what we are on. The next thing that needs to be done is we need to change the actual HTML behind the student's page. Otherwise, all the code we just added would be redundant. I selected a little much here. Okay. Next, go to views/student.index.cs HTML and replace all the code. The main changes that are made here is we are bringing in models from the page list as well as using code that it defines for us to make our lives a lot easier. Most of the code still hasn't changed. We still have how to define which each student's information based on last name, enrollment date, or name that they have. But the first thing that has actually changed is we need to make sure that we only display the students that are in the current model that we're on based on the page that we're in, and it actually receives that information and knows which one it's on based on the HTML that's right here. Once again, save your project. Now, let's go ahead and run the page so that you can see how it works. Let's go ahead and publish to Microsoft Azure. Sometimes this takes a little longer if you make a lot of changes. Now that it's up, let's go to Students page by clicking on this and hitting Students. The first time this is done, every student needs to be loaded into the new database. And now you see that instead of loading all the students that we have, we can now page through and each one will have more students or less students depending. If we close this, and for example, let's say I wanted to go to Visual Studios. Let's say I wanted 4 students per page. I just go to page size and hit 4, save my project, and publish it. Now, as you see, we are actually displaying 4 students per page. Thus, successfully, we now have paging. Now, let's say we wanted to add an about page on our page to describe each of the students' statistics. Here is how we would do that. The first thing that we need to do is we need to create a views model folder in our project. You do that by going right click on your project, hit add, and new folder. We are calling it views model. Sorry about that. Next thing that we need to do, oh, my apologies. It's actually view models. The next thing that we need to do in that page is create a class. Sorry, stupid Windows 8. Create a class, which we in this case are calling enrollmentdategroup.cs. In this page, we are going to replace the default code that is given to us with this very simple code that's right here. Control A to select, Control V to paste. Save your project. Now, what we are basically looking at is we now have an enrollment group based on the classes that each student is going to be in. The enrollment group will define what the enrollment date is and the number of students that are in that class. Now, we need to open the home controller, which is under controllers in your root project. Here, we are going to add 2 using lines based on information in our project. And we will also add this because we need to have a context for our project. It will be added. It's very important that it gets added right after the class definition header. Next, we are replacing the about method, which is defined as default when Visual Studios first builds this project, with our own method. Copy and paste doesn't want to work. There we go. Now we are defining our own method for what is shown in the about page when it is called. Next, we want to add a dispose method so that our databases don't get too full, as well as certain things, and so our web page does not get too bogged down. Next, as we did with students, we want to go ahead and change our actual about index, which is under views, home, about.cs.html. At first, it's just the default code that Azure gives it. The next, what we are now going to define is our views. For each class, the enrollment date and the number of students. And we're going to display that information for each class. Now, let's build the project with Control-Shift-B, and then publish it to Azure. Now, as you notice, when we click on the About before, the web page would crash because the functions weren't defined. Now, it shows that the enrollment dates that are shown and how many students are enrolled on those dates. This information would change once we added more students and added their enrollment dates. Each enrollment date and the number of students on that date would change. Thus, in this project, we have added searching, filtering, and paging, as well as shown you how to define a new tab or page under your Microsoft Azure web project.